welcome to tonight's webinar. For the first time, we are going to, in a long time, we're going to move out of the assessment cluster in regards to information and what we're going to deliver the training on. And we're actually going to more excitedly start to move back into the training side of the TAE qualification. So I know some of us still have got plenty of work to do within the assessment cluster, but at least the information side of it starts to move on, and hopefully now you've really got a good idea about evidence and how to create assessments and how to validate assessments and all that sort of stuff. So that quality assurance stuff is great because understanding that and then coupling that with what we're going to go through tonight will all start to make an even better picture for you looking back towards your assessment cluster and the information you now know about how to create assessments and how to ask yourself, what does a student need to learn, or what evidence do they need to provide more than what they need to teach. That allows you to go into this bit better. And I'm loving that everyone's saying good evening to each other. A fantastic thing and awesome. I'll know when you guys are having full-on conversations on the side there that I have become truly boring. But all good. Look forward to going through tonight's subject. And as I always say, and I don't know why I say it, but with nothing further to do, let's make a start. So TAE, DEL401A, plan, organise and deliver group-based training. We've already done the welcomes. I'm going to do a quick overview of tonight's topic. And we're going to have a Q&A session as well. So as I go through information tonight, guys, if you do want to chime in and ask something, feel free to do that. If we're still here at 11 o'clock, then you'll know that we'll turn the microphones off and I'll just throw out the information as fast as I can. But yeah, that would be really good, Alex. That's excellent. So tonight, obviously the units, we're going to have an overview of the group-based training unit. I'm actually going to take you through the assessment requirements for this first up, so you can get a clear picture of what's going to be required once we go through this subject. The subject itself tonight will mainly be around about and based about our learners and how to prepare and meet our learners' needs by identifying the different ways our learners learn things, from the principles of adult learning to learning styles and whatever the case may be. Now, our Cert 4 car driving instructors, if they did go through comprehensively some of the information found on our version of that course, then they would be very familiar with a lot of the information that we'll talk about tonight, and you should be able to have it reintroduced to you in the context of group-based learning. But however, it should having that taught to you via this forum should only hopefully reinforce what you've learned previously with us, or clarify maybe some parts of that previous learning. Instead of having an overview and a Q&A at the end, so to speak, like Alex said, we can do Q&A as we go through tonight's information. So Chapter 1, the unit of competence. This unit describes the performance outcomes, skills and knowledge required to plan, organise and deliver training for individuals within a group. This unit typically applies to a person working as an entry-level trainer, a teacher or facilitator, or with a training and assessment organisation. The person will be working from a learning program developed by someone else and structuring the learning around that program. So again, quite often a common complaint of RTOs centered around people that are qualified as TAE trainers is that they tend to be able to do this second paragraph, well, that if someone's already got a program developed, that they can come in and present that material. So they're kind of like just presenters. As you guys have already seen within this part of the course, or, this shallow part of our course, we've already got you running way above that. But the exciting thing tonight, and to complement this, is it's back in our world. All of us here are trainers already, and now you start to top up on your information and expertise around the whole training thing, because all of us are trainers before assessors, and tonight and the coming weeks will be hopefully really interesting to you and allow you to develop those skills further. For the assessment, you are going to create 3 session plans. You're going to deliver that training. You're going to review and report on it. and there's questions. There's 29 of them, but many will be familiar. As it says here, there is a slight unfair advantage to our previous Cert 4 car driving instructor students, in that some of the TAE units that you completed for us in the car driving instructor course will have you meet the evidence requirements for this unit. So in TAEDEL401A, we got you to create 3 training session plans. 2 of them would have been on driver training, and 1 was meant to be on a separate subject altogether. Those 3 training plans could be used as evidence. What I would probably suggest, and I think what tends to happen, is that because you've now grown as a trainer and you've learnt more information through this course and your own educational and personal pathway, that you'll probably go back to those 3 session plans and beef them up and make them a bit better. However, some of you did such great work right from day one that you'll be able to just grab those and go for it and just sort of forward those as your evidence, and you will have very little to do to get through this subject, which is great news. The other guys who have trained and done their CDI elsewhere, have a look at what you created for that topic, what the guys got you to create for that topic. It may still be useful. I had a gentleman today on the phone who trained somewhere else, and he was actually asking us about the TAE course and would he be able to do it, at some stage this year, despite being a part of the conversations earlier in the year when we're telling everyone to enroll. And he was mentioning what he'd done for the TAE, and obviously it just wasn't quite as comprehensive as probably that some of you guys had done. But bring your work forward. You never know what we can get out of it. But otherwise, it'll be better for you to do the assessment anyway. So the first thing I guess we need to ask ourselves is, what is learning? So learning is a personal process which occurs internally. Learning can involve the growth of knowledge, the development of skills, the change of attributes. It can also involve how we learn about ourselves and learning how to learn. And that's really important, because all of you who came back through the adult training pathway and that came back to do a Cert 4 driving instructor with us or with someone else, or Tristan with your trades and then moving into what you've done, all of you at some stage when you've come back as a student would have noticed that how you were as a student at the start of the course compared to how you were as a student at the end of the course was completely different. You relearned, or you learned once again how to learn, and that's important. So all of us will hope and want to achieve a growth of our knowledge, a development of our skills, a change of our attributes. And if you think of what the work you do, Tristan, and also the driver trainers, quite often those 3 first dot points are quite strong in what we're doing, in that we are trying to teach our clients in a way in which we grow their knowledge, we develop their skills, and quite often some of the hardest bits that we need to do is change their attributes as people. And that quite often involves the fact that they need to learn a little bit about themselves to then become a better worker, trainer, driver, or whatever the case may be. So, cool. Your experience of learning as a child should be considerably different from your experience of learning as an adult. Becoming a trained individual capable of teaching an individual or group should have you always remember that sharing experience and offering advice is not equal to facilitating an educational pathway. And I just happened to post that on all the Facebook driver trainer pages just a few minutes ago, because as I just opened up this presentation to have a quick flick through it before I started presenting it tonight, it was the one statement, I only got a few slides into it, but that was the one statement that really stood out to me. And it's so important that we understand that as facilitators, as trainers, as coaches, as workplace or trainers, that our educational pathway, what we offer our students in them becoming qualified, especially if we're working, in the auspice of an RTO or a TAFE or something where people are going to gain a qualification, that we understand, and especially for our driver trainers, especially in that area, that we don't get confused, or we don't start to make the fatal error of believing that offering advice and sharing experience is actually facilitating an education, because it's not. It's much more complex than that, and it's there is much more to it. And sharing experience and offering advice is wonderful, and it's good-hearted, but it's not providing a meaningful education, not by any stretch. So when it comes to facilitating learning, there are 3 components the facilitator needs to manage, and that's the learners, and especially in group-based learning, you're going to be managing a group of people, the content itself, what you're actually teaching, and then yourself, the trainer. And we need, and although we need to consider those 3 components separately, they all have to be managed on the fly. So we'll have strategies on how to deal with our learners. We'll have time and strategies about developing content and how we manage that. And then we'll have the bit where we think about how we do our job as trainers and how we can improve on that and how we handle certain situations in the job. And although we can think of those in isolation, when it comes time to be standing up and teaching in front of a class, we are quite often very automatically managing all that at the one time. And within that forms our learning context. And it's so important to strategize and think about those things and invest in yourself and make yourself better at those 3 components, because when you're up there and teaching, that prior knowledge will flow through automatically quite often, or if not, you'll find yourself drawing on prior knowledge that you've gone and read before or prepared for, and it really comes through and helps you be a more professional trainer. It's as simple as that. It helps you in so many different situations, and it's amazing. I quite often enjoy when I'm in a training environment and something a little bit left field gets thrown at me, and I draw back in the back of my mind a statement or something I read or some strategy I learned, and I can bring it forward and use it, and you see it work, and I love that feeling. I love that feeling when you draw on previous learning within a workplace scenario, and it helps you do your job better. I think it's one of the something that if you can become self-aware of that when you're doing that within your teaching job, it's a really satisfying feeling. You get to you see your learners enjoy the learning experience better. You subconsciously enjoy the fact that you realize you've drawn on some previous knowledge that you hadn't been accessing. And you've just made yourself a little bit better at your job. It's a very, very satisfying thing. And it's really important. I would say, try to become self-aware of that when you're doing your job and you draw back on some information from the past and you go, wow, hey, I just did that, and give yourself a little pat on the back silently. Chapter 2, our adult learners. This stuff I love. The stuff I'm going to talk about now, it is a brief description, although it's quite comprehensive what we're about to go through. There's 40 odd slides on this stuff that's about to come. However, you can take this so much further, both Tristan in your workplace, dealing with tradies and what the challenges they throw at you is not dissimilar in any way, shape or form in that what the driver trainers deal with in their training environments, because in some ways, the sorts of behaviours and thought patterns of tradies is not unlike, in some instances, some of our younger clients. We have people, normally tradesmen, will be very a lot of their I'll go through it later. I won't go through it, but a lot of their activity-based values or their values as a person is based around activity and getting the job done and being able to build things and do things and whatever the case may be. And that's not dissimilar to young adults, both male and female, having strong activity values. So a lot of the strategies and what you think about in training people works both ways, both for you working with tradespeople as well as the driver trainers working with adults of all different ages. So in this session, we'll predominantly spend time investigating adult learning theories and principles. Your ability to keep these theories in mind will directly link you to your success as a trainer. For some of you, like I said before, for some of you, this will be familiar material. Androgyny. Androgyny is a term introduced in 1833 by Cap, but further developed by Malcolm Knowles back in 1968, and it was brought into the public arena. Knowles defined androgyny as the art and science of helping adults learn. There are 6 main points to Knowles' theory. So it's interesting in that when we develop programs for school kids. We will, and funny enough, I've got a meeting early next week with a large grammar school. In my conversation with those heads of department, I'll mention how our program is based around a thing called pedagogy and also andragogy. And what that is the mix of our training is designed around the teaching of young people and also young adults. And that's really important because andragogy and getting your head around andragogy is something that can make you a far more effective trainer, not only in the job roles that you do, but remember this job this qualification is a stepping stone for you guys to expand your training world into RTOs, TAFEs, and whatever the case may be, and allowing this to take on this information and allow that to grow you as a person and as a trainer will help you no end. So with andragogy, the 6 main points or the first one is that the need to know. And you've heard me talk about this quite a bit, but adults need to know why they are learning something before undertaking to learn it. One of the first tasks of the facilitator of learning is to help learners become aware of the need to know. And it's so important. And I know within a driver trainer perspective that sometimes we forget to present that stuff beyond this is what you need to know to pass your test. And we talk about in our driver training courses about selling the legal reason for learning something, the safety reason for it, and then as a last resort, the test reason for it. But young adults and adults need to know why they need to learn something. And especially for you, Tristan, taking people off a work site to involve themselves in any type of learning process, if you know yourself, and you'll have seen it, if you do not sell to them the reason why they're undertaking this education or learning or assessment that you're about to put them through, you will lose them in a nanosecond. And it's the same for all adults. And you'll notice that anytime I've done any face-to-face training with you guys, I always open up by telling you, this is why we need to learn this. Because, and you've heard me speak about it before, generally speaking, all adults feel incredibly time poor. And even here tonight, if you weren't here tonight in front of this computer, there's probably 1,000 other things that you could be doing. So needing to remind adults why they have to be here and the benefits and the reasons for needing to learn something is absolutely paramount for any learning to occur from that point onwards. Because, and it was kind of funny, it was a crazy case a little bit, was last Saturday. You could see, and I was stirring Matt and Melissa about it, but you could see that with everything going on, and here we were doing validation again, they were twitchy, and it was that classic case of through fatigue and tiredness and all that kind of stuff. But it's amazing how if your brain can't, as an adult, totally convince itself that everything you're about to learn is so important, it gets really hard for us to be able to remain focused. And it's such an important part of adult learning. The learner self-concept. Adults are used to being responsible for their own decisions and for their own lives. They need to be treated as capable of self-direction. Adults resent and resist situations in which they feel others are imposing their will on them. And that's, again, a really important thing. And that's about facilitating an educational pathway. Just telling people, constant information dumping via verbal or written or whatever the case may be, and not allowing adults a little bit of a self-discovery voyage and time to reflect back on what they're learning within themselves, to which they can then, in their own brain, sort of work out their pathway to wisdom or to the end goal of understanding the topic you're trying to teach. If you don't facilitate that, then again, it becomes very frustrating for adult learners, because at this stage we are in control of our own lives and we don't like being told. And a good thing to remember is that as a trainer, if in your conversation with your learners, you start to find that you're feeling angry, then you've been dragged into a power argument. And you'll probably find that that's based around the fact that maybe your client at this stage doesn't feel like there's enough self-direction. So they feel like they're in a power struggle with you. So it is important sometimes to understand what different emotions mean in the conversations you can have with your clients. So with that, you'll find that, if you find yourself getting into a feeling of anger in discussing work or the assessment process or anything like that, or the learning process with your students, then you're probably being dragged into a power argument, and that's because they're feeling that their self-concept's not being appreciated enough. The role of the learner's experience. Adults have a variety of life experience that represents a rich resource for learning. Facilitators can tap into these experiences to assist the learner as a valuable resource for learning. It can be a hard thing to do sometimes as a facilitator, as a trainer. Sometimes it's just easier for you to follow the script, but understanding and finding out about people's past and whatever the case may be can be really, really valuable. I know myself, so much of, even when I first became a driver trainer, I not long finished. In actual fact, I was a driver trainer. I'd gone through the driver training course, and I was still going to Melbourne Uni, Burnley, to complete a landscape architecture course, a landscape designer course. And at the time, we were learning about writing specifications, telling people after we've drawn and designed something how to build it. And I remember, because that was written in a very legal sense, I was able to tap into that experience and place that with my ability to learn road law, because I'd been exposed to laws and how to write write things in a legal sense, so builders didn't not build how you told them to build something, and then when the wall fell over, you weren't the one being sued. When it came for me to learn about road law, that was something completely separate, but I was able to draw on that, and it helped me grasp road law really well and helped me to be very strong at road law. So we all have previous experiences, and our learners will have previous experiences that you should understand, that you should ask them what they've done, try to understand the job role, ask them what they did in their job role, and then as a trainer, see if you can match that to anything within the qualification or the content you're training, and even help the students recognize or identify where they can even go back and learn from their past experiences. A readiness to learn occurs strongly when adults move from one developmental stage to the next. Timing learning experiences to coincide with those development tasks is obviously important. Diane will remember last year a little bit, and especially in this course, we talk about the stages to learning. Quite often, when we start to learn something, we don't know anything about it. We're very excited. We can't wait to get the next bit of information, and it all is fantastic and wonderful. But we kind of draw it as a bit like a hump, that at the start you're at the flat bit, and you're traveling along and you're loving it. And then what occurs in every learning cycle, and especially with the TAE qualification, and it'll probably occur for you guys within the next, to be honest with you, as much as you're under the pump, what I'm about to talk about is still probably going to happen to you, for you guys, in the next 2 to 3 weeks. And what occurs is that you get to a point within any learning process where you finally understand enough to understand where you are in the learning journey, in the learning pathway. And it's at that point where you go, oh my God, I've learned so much, but oh no, I've still got so much more to learn. And that becomes the big hump and learning barrier for a lot of people. And if you don't learn as a trainer how to recognize that and understand that's the part of the course where you need to give your clients as much support and help as you can to get them over that hump, you'll quite often start to have a bit of a pattern of losing students 3/4 through a course, halfway through a course. At the start of a course, we're clueless. We've got no idea how clueless we are compared to the end goal. Everything's amazing and exciting, and I just can't get enough of this information. At some point, you start to understand where you fit in the big picture. Oh my God, I've learned so much. It's awesome. But oh no, I've got so much further to go. And you get depressed. So as a trainer, we need to learn how to get our students through that hump, because after that, it's the downhill ski. It's pretty easy. The light at the end of the tunnel becomes very, very close, and we're out the other side. But a readiness to occur happens within stages, and we need to know how to help support and facilitate that through our clients. Orientation to learning. Adults learn most effectively when learning is presented in the context of application in real life situations. So again, it's that whole thing of when we can, we get learners to, and that's the great thing about workplace learning, when it can be facilitated on the job, or when we can get very realistic role plays, it works best. So obviously for us, within the driver training course, just for one, obviously for us the practical side of develop safe car driving behaviours and others is that our clients theoretically take us out on a test route. We have 3 errors that they need to identify. They need to identify those errors, take us through a feedback session where they use good communication skills, and in particular the commend communication method, prepare us for training, take us out on 3 sort of driving lessons, and teach us or train us through what our 3 errors were until we've gained competence. The whole idea of that is trying to give you guys, or giving our driver trainer students, a quite realistic situation. Not that though your clients will ever present with 3 errors and 3 errors alone, but it's actually just around the fact that you're in a car, you're training in a car with driving issues, and that obviously helps. And likewise, I'm guessing, Tristan, for yourself, obviously, Tristan, for yourself, you would find that, I know you're sort of basically doing a more, I think, if I guess correctly, sort of office QA sort of stuff. But obviously, if there was any sort of practical training that you could do out on the job, would be a much better outcome for yourself. When offered training that will provide results for everyday outcomes, as I said, adult learners respond with commitment, and it's that whole the reason for learning, a little bit of a self-managed pathway, doing stuff that is directly linked to the job. Motivation. While adults respond to some external motivators, better jobs, promotions, higher salaries, the most potent motivators are internal pressures, desire for increased job satisfaction, self-esteem, quality of life. So it's not uncommon for internal, external barriers to affect an adult's learner's motivation easily. And at the end of the day, most adults do feel pressure. So it is important that as we find the motivating reasons, and if you get the first few steps correct, then this step in andragogy will half of it will take care of itself, or 3/4 of it will take care of itself, because the environment is all directly linked to relevance, and the fact that they're a little bit managing means that they'll be feeling like they're in control of it, and that helps with motivation. But obviously, whether you're trying to work with external motivators or internal motivators, getting to know your client, getting to understand why they're there, and especially around self-esteem and quality of life, let alone job satisfaction, quite often those things can become even though they can be the absolute motivator for someone undertaking the course, they can very quickly become a barrier, and especially self-esteem. If someone's been motivated to undertake training based around low self-esteem, obviously, the moment they find some barriers or to their learning, or some difficulties in their learning, then that's low self-esteem can kick in, and it'll be your job in a supportive way to help them get through that, without trying to be a psychologist when you're not. So there are more thorough explanations on this theory in the Learner Guide, as well as online. Like I said, for everything I talk about, there is much more detail out there. Principles of adult learning. So you'll quite often hear me refer to the principles of adult learning. There are 6 to 8 key factors for this theory dependent upon your information resource. The oldtraining.gov website listed the following. It is also available within your Learner Guide. So again, the TAE course does have useful learner guides. They're heavy reading. There's a lot of content in there. I would be absolutely downloading and saving all those PDFs for future reference, that long after this course, you can go back to a particular learner guide and refer to it and go through it and reinforce anything that we've spoken about through our journey through the course. Active participation. So adults learn best when they actively participate. That is when they are involved physically, intellectually, or emotionally. And you can already see that there's going to be similarities within what I just talked about and the principles of adult learning. So this occurs on two levels. Firstly, adults should be given choices and opportunities to direct their learning. What did I say in the last theory? Secondly, adults learn best by doing. Trainers should ensure that the learners are talking, making, writing, listening, and thinking throughout the session. Obviously, active participation is incredibly important on all levels for adult learners, and the doing part, which will tie into some learning styles that we speak about a little bit later. Again, that provides that relevance, which is so important with young adults and adults alike. Meaningful and relevant. This has become, I would say, in the last 24 months to 36 months, so 2 to 3 years, even less maybe, this has really become such a key point. And when I look at everything that, and I'm sorry to do this to you, Tristan, but when I look at everything that Vic Rhodes and the TAC are developing in the training of young people in the PDSP, in the Safe Driver program, and all that sort of stuff that they're doing, it's all starting to finally come into and pick up this meaningful and relevant part of the principles of adult learning. And you can see in all the material that they produce that they keep on referring within their stuff that they're doing about how to bring up and make it meaningful and relevant. So adults need to be able to identify the meaning and relevance of the material, the whys and the hows of the training session. Trainers should mention why and how the training will proceed as early as possible in the session. And where it's gone another step further, and I'm actually going to do this with you guys over the next week or three as a bit of a experiment, but and you see it, like I said, in so much new learning material, you see where someone will train someone, there'll be information that you read, or say, for instance, now I'll be training someone in something, and then I'll say to them, so why is it important that you know this? Or why is it important that you've done this? Or how will this help you within your workplace? Or how will this help you be a safer person? And it's taking those logical steps. And I think I might have spoken to you about this, Melissa, or one of the other people online. This giving them information, coaching them through something, not reminding them, but asking them the question, important that they have learned this and how it will help them and what the benefits are and all that kind of stuff. Finding the questions to ask your students after you've taught them something, so they don't hear that you tell them it's a great thing that they learned this, but in actual fact that they come up and identify that themselves through the open questions you ask them, gives meaningfulness and relevance to what they've learned. And what all the studies are saying now, that is where you get long-term learning from. So being able to tell your student, it's really important to stop here, or for you, Tristan, it's really important that, once you get at the end of the job, that you fill out this paperwork and make sure you fax it by the end of the day because it'll make the boss happy or whatever. That only goes so far. So getting them to identify the benefits of making the boss happy, or the benefits of doing the job right, and whatever the case may be, and having them tell you why, gives whatever you've taught them meaningfulness and relevance, and that goes so much further into lasting education. Holistic learning. So adults like to know where this material fits in relation to the whole, so that they can fit the specific details into a bigger picture. Adults have a wealth of experience across many fields. A well-organized trainer might use the attributes of specific participants to enlighten others, or to enliven the session with stories told by the participants. Oh my God, here I've been talking about Tristan and all you guys. It doesn't mean I'm organized. Anyway, cool. Multisensory learning. So using more than one sense, sight, sound, taste, smell, touch during the learning experience helps the learner to understand and remember the content. The differences in learning styles mean that some people like to see things in pictorial form, others like to have the written word, or to help digest the information. Good training involves different forms of presentation of the same material. That'll talk about all those things in much more detail, so I'll leave that. concerned with first and last impressions. So people best retain the information that they receive at the beginning and the end of a session. Make sure you provide a clear introduction in order to create a positive impression at the beginning. End on a positive note, with learners leaving feeling confident and sure of what is required of them. Effective trainers have a short list of key messages that they want to convey, and these should be produced during both the introduction and conclusion of the session. And that, guys, now has gone one step further since this material has been made. And that's where the relevance of the last slide, the one about meaningful and relevance comes in, because what you're doing at the end of your training session, rather than telling students about the importance of what they've learned, gets them to tell you why it's important to them that they have learned that. And that's where success, true success, lies. You think about it, and I would love for you guys to do it tomorrow. Anyone who's going out into a training environment tomorrow, whenever you finish teaching someone, asking your students, so why has it been important to learn this, and how's that going to help you? Whatever the case may be, whatever open questions you want to, and have them dredge up that information, and you'll see a difference both within them and yourself. It's incredible. Practiced and reinforced. Learners need the opportunity to practice and reflect on what they have learned in order to effectively apply the new learning to their workplace. Good trainers reinforce content by adding application tasks to theoretical sessions or beginning new sessions by summarizing the previous session. Again, it's kind of funny, but if you think about tonight, automatically without thinking, I kind of still referenced a little bit about the assessment cluster, and then we talked about this, and then as we go through this subject over the next week or two, there's going to be some activities that we do. It's what we do along the way, and it's something that you should be looking at wanting to do. And it is again a important facet in regards to what we do within our jobs. Especially when we use the different training styles, and I will go through that a little bit later, but the volume of learning, so the idea theoretically that you could do a TAE course online within 2 weeks was something that the government or the auditors went, no more, we're not having this anymore, because there's so much information within this TAE course that to do it properly, you need to have time to practice and reinforce the learning, and you can't learn everything that a TAE qualification asks you to do within 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Most of them are 2-week courses. At some stages there was get your TAE in 4 days. You just can't do it. If you guys, I don't know if you can see Alex's is typing in the corner a story. Alex did a professional development session yesterday. I haven't got to do it yet, and Matt's about to sit in on it as well at some stage. But if you have a read of what Alex is typing in the corner, you'll see the current situation in regards to the new TAE course across Australia. So there was 567 RTOs that currently have this course on their scope of registration. Thus far, only 67 applied for the new TAE course. And of that 67, the government at this stage has only approved 3. We haven't applied yet. So we haven't decided yet whether we're going to do the new TAE. The funny thing is, after Alex said the PD and where the government said people were falling down on getting it on their registration. Luckily, it's within our strong suit of what we do. There's a lot of things we could do better, but the one thing that they were doing is talking about is where people fall down. It was one of the areas that we're strong in. So whether that means we'll end up doing it, I'm not sure. Regular and useful feedback. Learners need to know how well they are doing. Feedback provided early in the learning experience can mean that learners practice and reinforce the correct behaviours. Adults in particular are often nervous about learning new things and may feel incompetent or threatened by the training process. Feedback gives reassurance about how well they are doing or how they could do a new task better. And that's exactly right. Again, there should be lots of for those that have already been in the training environment, you should know a little bit about the need for regular and useful feedback. It's important. There's a balance to feedback. You don't want to be falsely pumping people's tires up to the point where they no longer have a realistic view of where they are within the learning journey, and that can happen a little bit as driver trainers. We can all tell our clients they're all awesome and fantastic because we like making them feel better about themselves. But at the same time, too, someone who's about to wrap themselves around a pole because you've been telling them they're awesome for the last 3 weeks, say, am I ready for the test now? And you're thinking, in actual fact, if you drove by yourself, you'd have a crash. And that's maybe as a result of you just being a little bit too positive. And I can be one who can do that for sure. So feedback needs to be provided in a positive and constructive manner. When providing feedback, concentrate on the action or the behavior and not on the person. Effective trainers don't say, you've done really well. Focus on the person. Effective trainers will say, I like the way you made that point. You focus on the act. And that's really important, that you don't focus on the person, you focus on the act. And that helps to create a feedback environment that not only does it work probably when it's in the positive, but when you have something in the negative, that they haven't done something quite right, you're not saying to them, you've done that wrong, or you're wrong, or that was really bad, in a way that makes them think you're personally attacking them. So if you can practice and get the whole feedback right on focusing on the acts of people, it'll work in both directions. Reward. Learners need to be able to identify the benefits and value of the learning experience. Benefits could be learning skills with applications for their work life, home life, or interests. Benefits could be time to think and plan away from usual routines. These benefits act as a reward for the work learners have done and help motivate further learning. I won't go into too much information. I think that's pretty straightforward. Sometimes it is also valuable to provide external recognition and reward. However, adults are more responsive to the internal motivators like self-esteem and enjoyment. So again, tapping into that in a nice way and getting them to, again, if you go back to that whole reinforcing the positives of the learning experience by getting them to answer the questions that allows them to become self-aware of the benefits and rewards of why they've undertaken this training and their progress through the training, helps all this. It all ties in beautifully. Good trainers are always looking for opportunities to indicate success in participants, is recognised and appreciated. So, yeah, exactly like I just said. I won't go through that any further. The next group of topics is a little contentious. It's about learning styles and theories. So just to finish, sorry guys, just to go back. So that closes off the principles of adult learning: reward, feedback, practice and reinforcement, first and last impressions, multisensory learning and holistic learning, meaningful and relevance, active participation. They're all the key steps of the principles of adult learning. If we think about andragogy, it was very similar, but they were around motivation, orientation to learning, readiness to learn, the role of the learner's experience, and the learner's self-concept, and the need to know why they're learning something. So as you could see within andragogy, we haven't gone through pedagogy in this particular presentation tonight, but andragogy is almost like an overview of the principles of adult learning. We're now going to narrow in on, the next part's really going to narrow in on this stuff, the multisensory learning under the principles of adult learning. And that's categorized, or the theory of this is known as learning styles. So it is a little bit contentious and it is up for debate. And what they're actually saying now is that the whole key factor of making sure you understand someone's learning style to best deliver your training is actually superseded by and enhanced by and made better by doing the whole connected learning with meaning. So what we talked about before in this area, the meaningful and relevant, is saying that even though what I'm about to talk about is quite interesting, if you're getting this part right under the principles of adult learning, then you're going to cover off quite a bit to do with this learning style theory. So hopefully that'll make sense as I go through. So I'll read it off and then we'll keep on moving. So the next group of topics is a little contentious. It is a further list of theories in relation to understanding how adults learn and the importance of becoming a flexible trainer that can adapt their training styles to best match their group's learning style. Although it's up for debate that people actually have a preferred learning style, what we do understand is that training that involves all learning styles becoming effective, meaningful training, and that effective, meaningful training delivers the best results. There you go. Sorry, once again, I've gone ahead of myself with my own information, even though I've got it in the slides. There is similarity within the individual theories. So we can learn by experience, by touch, feel, and emotional connection. We can also learn through reading, writing, visual images, diagrams, and other visual stimulants that inform us about events. Finally, we learn through discussion, listening, questioning, and talking when we process ideas and try to make sense of events. So it's interesting here that this is starting to talk about the senses, the sense of sight, hearing, touch, and taste. And under this sort of three banners, these three dot points here, we've got VAC, which is the three learning style theory. And it's all what I'm about to go through is underpinned back by these three short sentences that we can learn by experience, by touch, feel, and emotional connection, that we can learn through reading and writing and looking at visual images, whether they're pictures or video or YouTube. And finally, we can actually learn through discussing and listening to people, questioning and talking things out with other people. So if I was to suggest that one of the following three learning styles pertains to you, I would suggest that you either have a visual learning style, and this means you learn by seeing and looking. You'll tend to take detailed notes rather than get involved in discussions. You tend to sit at the front of a class so you can see clearly. You try to avoid visual barriers when you're in a learning environment. You don't like having things in front of you that can kind of clutter your vision. You'll tend to benefit from illustrations and presentations, and especially those in color. And they sort of say, and again, this is all theories, and there's 100 different ways that they will do these following dot points in different publications and whether you go on the internet or whatever the case may be. But they'll say that people that like to use visual learning styles will tend to make comments like, so how do you see the situation? And what do you see stopping you from being able to achieve that? Or do you see what I'm showing you at the moment? Do you understand what's going on? Can you see what I'm saying? So you'll talk in this visual language. Auditory learning style. So this means that you learn by hearing and listening. They'll say that you will enjoy discussions and talking things through and listening to others. You'll acquire knowledge by reading out aloud, and you like to hum or talk to yourself. And quite often you'll make, again, the theories are quite often you'll be heard to say things like, or possibly say things like, when you're in a discussion and you start to agree with someone or you can understand what someone's saying, you'll say things like, I hear you clearly. I'm wanting you to listen to me. Probably something that we say to our children for those who are parents. And you'll say things like, that sounds great. That sounds good to me. So you have this bit of an auditory language going, sort of helping to explain your psychological state, so to speak. And then the third one within the VAC system is kinesthetic learning style. So this means you learn by touching and doing. You will need lots of breaks and will want to move around. You'll tend to speak with your hands and gestures. You'll remember what was done, but have difficulty with what was said or seen. And you'll learn through doing activities. So you like to just, give me a go at it. Show me once, let me see you do it once, and then let me work it out for myself. Let me give it a go. I'll work it out. Just give me time to give it a go. And you'll tend to say, again, your language will be around things like, how do you feel about this? Let's move forward together on this one. And are you in touch with what I'm saying? So it's all a bit touchy-feely, so to speak, which is not a bad thing. And that kind of closes off the third learning style. I was about to go on with a bit of a rant, but it looks like I have already written it in the slide. So let me read the slide and we'll get through it quicker. So in my personal experience, I find I use different parts of to each VAC category depending on what I'm learning. Simultaneously, I find I do some of the you will from each category, but not all. And how did you relate to the system? So what I find, I guess, is that and it kind of probably goes on to this link that's here that I won't hit this link, but you guys will be able to hit this link because this PowerPoint, it should be on the student portal, is that it talks about that really probably all of us use these different learning styles when we're actually learning different things. And as long as our facilitators, our trainers during that training process are understanding how to connect us to whatever we're learning with meaning while we use these different learning styles, gets us to our end goal of a really enjoyable learning experience. So I definitely would say that I find myself using all three of these learning styles at different times. And I probably would find it personally hard to say that I have one particular preference over another, because I just think I use it at different times for different things. Without a doubt, if I'm learning complex theoretical knowledge or whatever the case may be, I definitely become more of a sort of visual auditory learner. Obviously, when I'm learning how to do something, I tend to kick into a kinesthetic learning style where I want to give it a go, maybe watch it be done, have a little bit of explained to me, but then let me have a go at it and let me try to perfect the actual process personally. I know when I'm learning to do things, not only will I want to practice it, but in some ways I'll go into a visual learning style and I picture myself doing it correctly before I actually do it. So I know when I learn a doing thing, I always mentally picture myself doing it correctly, and then I just try to reproduce that, which obviously I don't do very well. But that's where I guess even though I'm learning at one particular thing, I'm using different, definitely using different learning styles. So the next group of topics is a little contentious. It's a further list of theories in relation to understanding. Yeah, I don't know. I've got that one there. Good. I'm going to go past that. So the next learning style model is based upon Honey and Mumford's learning style model, and it's based on Kolb's learning cycle, known as experiential learning. It was the first sort of peer-reviewed paper, I think, is 1984. And what it is, it's known as the part learning theory, and that's pragmatists, reflectors, activists, and theorists. Again, all of it will tie into or have similarity to the last lot of learning styles. Again, I like a lot of the stuff that's within the last two or three theories, learning style theories that we're going to go through tonight. I really like, and I can identify with them, but I can identify with all of them. So I'm hoping that you can too. So pragmatists are keen to try out new ideas, theories, and techniques to see if they work in practice. They search out new ideas and take their first opportunity to use them. They like to get on with things. They act quickly and confidently on ideas that attract them. They tend to be impatient. They can be down-to-earth people who like making practical decisions and solving problems, and they respond to problems and opportunities as a challenge and believe there is always a better way, and if it works, it's good. Now, again, I would say in my working life or my learning life, there'll be times when I probably feel like I'm a pragmatist, and then there'll be heaps of other times when I don't feel like I am. So, again, as I explain these different theories, I'm hoping that I'm giving you enough time to sort of self-reflect and ask yourself, which of any of these dot points am I ticking off myself? And hopefully, like I said, by hearing me talk about this, you're getting a better understanding of how you are as a learner, because you understanding who you are as a learner will make you a better trainer. And hopefully understanding there is different learning styles will help you from not making the single biggest fatal mistake you can as a trainer, and that's become the type of trainer that only trains in the way that they like to learn. Especially as driving instructors, what I have found over the years when we've ever gone back into vehicles or had time with qualified instructors, the biggest thing we see driving instructors do is teach the way they like to learn themselves. And that's a big problem. And what happens, and I know the guys who have done our driver training course will have read the material around this, but what we say is the biggest problem is when you don't understand that you're only teaching in your own learning style or the way you like to learn, is that for the 3 in every 10 clients that you get that happens to coincidentally learn like you do, you'll fall in the trap of calling them your smart learners. They're my smart clients, because they just happen to, not them, you just happen to be fluking clients that learn like you, and you find the other 7 out of 10 difficult because they have a different learning style, and you're so poor at your job that you're unable to understand that it's actually you who needs to change the information, the way you deliver your information, to make their learning experience better, which would actually make your teaching experience better. And that's one of the biggest issues I find in our industry. I'm not sure about yourself, Tristan, but if you think about it too, Tristan, the way you deliver your information to your students, and even for yourself, Di, if you're giving information to your clients only in the way that it makes sense to you, then you're only catering to a very small amount of people that you deal with on a daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly basis, and you're not going to make enough people happy. Activists, they involve themselves fully without bias in new experiences. They enjoy the here and now and are happy to be dominated by immediate experiences. They tend to be open-minded, are enthusiastic about anything new. They tend to act first and consider consequences afterwards. They fill their days with activities. They tend to tackle problems by brainstorming. They like to be in the middle of things. They get bored with implementation and longer-term consolidation, and believe that you should try anything once. So again, you may have already ticked half the boxes from both the last two theories, and that would be typical. Or through your life's journey, you may have found that at different times in your life, these different theories about learning styles will have applied to you, which is a great reminder that life is not static, and we do, and it is a moving thing. And hopefully for you guys that you can, as I go through this stuff, go, oh yeah, I remember when I was like that, or geez, one day I would hope to be like that, or whatever the case may be, and that you reach that goal. Because in everything that I say here, there'll be things that you like and identify with, and there'll be things that you identify with and dislike, and there'll be things that you go, that's me, and there'll be things that I talk about that you say, I wish that was me. So hopefully, again, this is allowing you a bit of an understanding and of the journey of life, and how we can sort of move through different stages. And if it's not, and you're like, nah, man, I've been like this since the age of 17, then, like I said, there's an opportunity to come from that even. Reflectors. Reflectors like to stand back and ponder experiences from many perspectives. They like to collect data and analyze it thoroughly before coming to conclusions. They tend to postpone reaching a definitive conclusion because of data collection. They like to consider all possible angles and implications before making a move. They prefer to watch others in action, tend to take a back seat in meetings or discussions, act with a view to the wider context. They believe in being cautious and adopt a low profile and have a slightly distant, tolerant air about them. So again, that seems to be how they categorize reflective learners. Theorists, they adapt and integrate observations into complex but logically sound theories. They think problems through in a vertical, step-by-step logical way. They tend to be perfectionists, are keen on basic assumptions, principles, theories, models, and systems of thinking, tend to be detached, analytical, and dedicated to rational objectivity, need things to make sense, prefer to maximize certainty, and are uncomfortable with subjective judgment and later thinking, and believe in rationality and logic. If it's logical, it's good. It's kind of funny. Some of this stuff kind of makes me think of the journey of young males. So when I look at, say, for instance, the activists who are open-minded and want to have a go at everything, you can quite often, not with everyone, but quite often that can be categorized with a younger male, sometimes, but not all, far from all, but the stereotypical young Aussie male, so to speak. Whereas you get through to about here, the theorist, and I'm sure some people will go, that sounds like my husband, or whatever the case may be. So it's or partner, or whatever the case may be. So it is interesting, and that goes the other way too, as well. People, I guess, in some ways, through their life cycle, like I said, it's all a bit of a journey, and you being able to recognise this from a trainer's perspective can make your job so much better, because obviously having a training content or style that would best work with an activist, can you imagine what kind of inner turmoil it would cause with a theorist? And that's important because sometimes, again, how we design content and information needs to be well-rounded so people don't get lost within the training style, and that they can find a comfortable place to move through the learning. So, of course, as you reflect on the last group of theories, you need to ask yourself, did I identify with one that's most like me, or the one I admire most, or hope that I am? And that is quite often something that people will do through those last group of theories. I'll maybe reflect on a little bit on what they think they are, and then also maybe gravitated towards the one they would like most be like. Next up in the theory stakes is global analytical. I really like this. This is one of my favorite theories out of all of them. I know it's funny to say I've got a favorite theory. It's like get a life. I understand that. Maybe I need to. But yeah, global analytical theory learners is really interesting. I love it when I'm in a group environment and you can see the global and analytical learners struggling to make sense of the information or try to work together. Last year, I had a small group of students. A couple of years ago, I had a small group go through this course, and it got to a point where I had two students working together on the TAE in isolation to the rest of the class. And it was great to watch them work together. They formed a really strong relationship. But when it came to their learning, one of them was a global learner and the other person was an analytical learner. And it was hilarious to watch them week in, week out, working through some of the assessment tasks or being in the classroom with me. I was delivering that one in a classroom, watching them try to get to the same end goal, but completely and utterly from total opposite learning styles. This is one theory I can often see being displayed in our student population. I'm not suggesting it's more accurate, just one that I tend to notice a little easier. Global learners. So global learners need to see the big picture first. They like to see the whole picture and know the end result before beginning. And that's where for any practical training of anything, that's why DEDICT is such a good model for driver trainers, because DEDICT will work well with global learners as well as analytical learners. And the great thing about DEDICT, and sorry, Tristan, DEDICT stands for demonstrate, explain, demonstrate slowly, imitate, coach, and then test. It's a training method that we're going to learn about and talk about. But DEDICT is a training method that helps to cover all learning styles. And that's the great thing about it. Whether you subscribe to the principles of adult learning, Maslow, global analytical, learning styles, whatever one it is, androgyny, it doesn't matter. DEDICT will cover all those, but especially in this environment, it's great for global learners because you demonstrate the task to start off with. And whenever, again, if you think back at some of those other theories and the principles of adult learners, when they say you need to explain and sell why we're learning something, the relevance of it, that is also obviously ticking off for your global learners the big picture. I know I'm a bit of a global learner for some things. I tend to want to know what the big picture is. So as I learn the information, I can put it within my brain in the logical sequence to the end goal. So I love to know the end goal first. So as I learn, I can then put that information in my logical sequence, which harks back to adult learners wanting to take a little bit of self-direction. It doesn't mean when we talk about adult learners being able to take a bit of self-control that they're running the timetable. It's even an internal process. So for me, being able to know the big picture, what the end goal is, it then allows me to provide relevance to myself as I learn the new material. Hopefully that makes sense and some of you can identify with that. Analytical learners like to learn one piece at a time. They enjoy a clear sequence which starts at the beginning and moves to the end one step at a time. Obviously, because I tend to be a global learner, when I have analytical learners in the classroom, sometimes I can see that my fall down as a trainer can be that I don't cater enough to analytical learners, that I think by providing the big picture, I can then jump a little bit in information and sequencing, because it's all okay. I want to be dynamic and to the group, and I want to be able to respond to the group's needs as they present. Because as a global learner, as long as I know the end goal, I'm comfortable with the jumping around and whatever, because I'll just go and put it in its logical sequence. But for the poor old analytical learner in my class who wants a very clear, defined step-by-step process, it can be a real challenge. And I like to develop people to be flexible and dynamic, because as a trainer, and especially a trainer in group-based environments, you're going to have your analytical learners and you're going to have your global learners, and you need to cater for both. And sometimes our problem with you'll hear people complain about, well, complaints go both ways. When you've got a global trainer with an analytical learning group, they will not like and feel like the person's not organized and there's no clear sequence or whatever the case may be. And likewise, when you get global learners working with an analytical trainer, they're like, oh my God, this person is so boring. It's just, it's like they've got to read from a script and they can't deviate off it. So, and obviously, when you get global learners with global trainers, analytical trainers with analytical learners, it tends to be a great fit. But as a trainer, it's our job to try to understand that and balance what we do to be able to cater for both. And it can be hard. It's difficult. I think categorizing the global and analytical and being flexible in that is more difficult than responding to different learning styles in regards to visual learners, kinesthetic learners, and auditory learners. So instead of seeing global and analytical learners as two separate groups, imagine that all learners sit somewhere along a continuum, along a line, which runs between these two positions. Some people move along the continuum, along that line, depending on the task at hand. Others are more fixed in their approach and need information to be presented in one particular style. And again, this is why Dedict is so good for not just driver trainers, but for anyone training anything, because you demonstrate, you explain, you demonstrate step by step slowly, you get the client to imitate you and practice it, and then you go out and coach it. That is so good, because whether they're visual learners, kinesthetic learners, auditory learners, we are ticking off every learning style, as well as the analytical and global. It really is the only way, or not the only way, and it really is a strong part of what we should be doing. And it saddens me when our students go out and try to use Dedict on job interviews with driving schools and they don't know what's going on. The driving school person's like, what's this that you're doing? Why aren't you just telling me at the end of the street, turn left, check my center left mirror, put my left signal up, brake gently for me, look to your right, stop at the line. Is it safe to get? It's safe to go. You should start to go now. Gas to 2000, clutch to friction point. So it's terrible when our students say, he made me go back to old school instructing, even though the last 3 months you've been teaching me how that's no good and you want to use this positive coaching technique. But that's one of the problems with our industry. And I'm sure, Tristan, if you can get your head around Dedict, and you'll learn that over the next coming weeks, and you can start to apply that to your training environment, you will get far greater results out of what you achieve with your people. Another model that explores the way individuals prefer to learn focuses on two hemispheres of the brain and how they're used. Anatomically, the brain is divided into two hemispheres, the left and right. Studies have indicated that the two hemispheres have different functions and characteristics. So the left brain versus the right brain. It's logical versus holistic. It's sequential versus random. It's rational versus non-rational. It's analytical versus synthesizer. It's objective versus subjective. It's mathematical versus artistic. It's linear versus intuitive. It's symbolic versus metaphoric. It's verbal versus non-verbal. It's temporal versus non-temporal. And it looks at parts and it looks at wholes. So again, it really ties into your analytical and your globals, doesn't it? It really does fall along those lines, but it's just another type of theory. Quite often it's interesting when we used to sometimes do a testing process on trainers and on people within a workplace dealing with their numeracy and literacy levels. What we tended to find is that people with higher maths than English skills tend to be very analytical in their learning, and they tend to be analytical trainers, which can sometimes be an issue because sometimes these people can only see things being done the way they like seeing it being done, or they can only see it being done in one way. So as a trainer, they will tend to want to control the whole learning process, which then causes frustration within the student population because there's none of that freedom, that principles of adult learning, of that self-discovery pathway being fostered, because if I just can't see it being done any other way, can be very difficult. These people can tend to be suited to really particular training, and maybe driver training is not a great thing for these people because, or even something like Tristan does, dealing with lots of different tradies in different environments with different skill sets and all that. Being a left brain trainer could quite often cause a little bit of an issue. Likewise, the right brain has got its good points and its bad points as well. But if you think about it, being able to be flexible and intuitive does help for you to hopefully identify what types of learners you have and modify what you're doing to make it flexible and get those people to their goals, discovering a learning style and a learning pathway that best suits them. Quite often, it was interesting. I used to do a bit of work with DECA, and a part of the people I used to work with DECA, they'd go into trucking companies to try to fix trucking companies that had huge accident and insurance issues. And quite often what would happen is trucking companies had a history of promoting the best driver into the management position. The problem was the skill set, the kind of the hemispherical learning style that it takes to become a great truck driver. You think about the hours it takes to be a great truck driver on the road, driving that truck without your mind wandering too far. It tends to make you a very left brain orientated person. That's you by yourself on the road, taking control of yourself in a very high way to keep everyone alive. They say you're so good at that they move you into management. All of a sudden, you are meant to become a right brain person. You're meant to understand different people. All of a sudden, you're meant to be able to be flexible. And it used to cause a huge problem because the person that is a great truck driver doesn't tend to become a great manager, because what it made them to be, that left brain use that made them great at driving trucks, was never going to serve them well managing people. And you would have, as a result of that, crash rates go up, high turnover in staff because people would leave because they just can't work with that bastard, or whatever the case may be. And it's an interesting thing. And think about sometimes your managers or people in the workplace that have got promotions because of their work ethic, and whether or not they'll end up going into positions that suited them as managers, because maybe it didn't. Maybe what it took for them to be a great worker is a completely different skill set to what they needed to be a great manager. So research has shown that learning that undertakes the use of both hemispheres is the most effective, despite a student's preference for one hemisphere. Finally, there's Maslow's hierarchy. Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory in psychology proposed by Abraham Maslow back in 1943. It was a paper, The Theory of Human Motivation, in Psychological Review. Maslow subsequently extended the idea to include his observations of humans' innate curiosity. It categorizes the whole principles of adult learning and engagement into the elemental. It reinforces the notion that you must connect learning to meaning early on, so it promotes the buy-in. As you can see, guys, no matter what the theory, it's all about getting that buy-in from the start, reminding an adult learner why they're there, why it's important to learn this stuff, how it's going to make them reach their goal, and what it means to them, whether it's more successful as a person, let alone any other external benefits. Maslow's pyramid is an image often associated with this topic. Anyone who's done anything ever within any training will have seen this pyramid. It demonstrates that the basic fundamentals for adult motivation are at the base of everything we do. There's that physiological need that we need food, water, warmth, and rest. So you learning something or doing something helps you, motivates you to be able to get food, water, warmth, and rest. Then that's going to be something that you are going to be strongly motivated by. The safety needs is next, that it provides security and safety. Belongingness and love needs. So after that, we have our relationship sort of side of things, the psychological needs, and that includes our self-esteem. Self-esteem needs can absolutely motivate people. Sometimes, as we know, that people can be motivated by esteem issues unhealthily. It has too much of a weighting. And then finally, on top of the pyramid, as the least thing that will motivate adults is self-actualization, which is achieving one's full potential, including your creative activities. So it says we have these basic needs, which is being able to provide security, safety, food and warmth, sort of food, water, security, safety, and that's a key element to everything that we do, probably subconsciously. Beyond that, we have our psychological needs, what kind of makes us happy in the head. And then beyond that, just sort of improving ourselves as a person. And that's Maslow's theory. So again, if you are connecting learning with meaning, so why is it that you need to do this? Well, it makes me a safer person or a safer worker or a safer driver, which allows me to get home to my family. And it allows me to pay my bills by doing this safely. I don't get harmed. I keep my job. By keeping my job, I can provide food, water, warmth, and rest for myself and my family. You are motivating someone to do something at the very basic and core of their being, and you will get plenty of buy-in, let alone going up to the psychological needs of saying, hey, by doing this, you're going to feel good about yourself. You're going to move up within the workforce, whatever the case may be. So hopefully that makes sense. That you can, the lower you can tap into these needs within the Maslow pyramid, the better buy-in you're going to get from your client. So this learning topic examines some of the theories associated with training of adults. No doubt it's important that you keep these theories in mind in any training environment. The next lesson will move into more of the practicalities of developing and delivering group-based learning. But I want you all, please, tonight to go away, think about what your learning styles are. Think about how, and even if you start reading material, whatever the case may be, but over the next week or two, think about how you can start to identify your students' learning styles, or whatever the case may be, or whether they're global, analytical, or whatever the case may be, and see how you go at adjusting your training to suit that. It will make the training experience so much more enjoyable for you, and it will certainly serve you well within the TAE environment if you were to come in and start to train in this space. Question and answers, anyone? Is there class on Saturday? Hell yeah. 8 a.m. All good. Well, if there's no questions, you can always unmute yourself. I look forward to seeing you Saturday morning, guys. I can't remember if anyone here is attending the Safe Driver PD, Defensive Driver Course PD on Friday. If you are, I'll see you there. Otherwise, guys, I'll see you Saturday, and we'll take it from there. All right, Diane, that's cool. It might be the assessment. Some of that's the new portal, Diane, is locked off, so we might have to. Like I said to you, we'll get there on Saturday, and we'll have a good look at everything that you've done, where you're up to, and where we need to get you to fill in the gaps. So don't stress too much, because I don't want you wasting copious amounts of times trying to work it out yourself, when maybe half an hour, 45 minutes with me will clear it up for you. Feel free to do it if you like, absolutely. But if you don't want to, wait till Saturday and we'll sort you. Cool. Thanks, guys. Very much appreciate it, and we'll see you Saturday.